Hey guys, in my previous video, I had a comment which was stating that if count was not in the DOM but was a state that we were passing to another component or we were using for another functionality, how would we test that the value changed, right? Okay, so from this question, like the they wanted to know how to test the state has changed if that state is being used in another component, right? In the previous video, I was actually testing the state which was being shown on the DOM, right in that particular component. But in some cases, you may use the state in different components and you want to test those components using that particular state. So I have a component over here that I created, which is supposed to take in a product, right? A product, and it's going to search that product from an API. When it gets the related product for that particular product, it's going to render that to the page, showing the other products that relates to the particular product that you are looking for. It's actually a dummy API. It's not really doing anything, just returning an empty string, an empty array, just simulating some real life situations. Right? So this is an example. So this component is actually using a product where in this case right here is we have a form where the form has a field for product. We can set the type in the product and the quantity. Ignoring the quantity is not really important right now. So we just need a product, a search for the product. And over here, we are passing that product that the user has typed into, has searched, and then we are going to show the related products for that particular search. Pretty simple use case, right? Most likely is something that you might come across, right? So now the main thing here is how do we test something like this? How do we test the interaction between this particular product that's from one component to another component in the case that we are actually not showing that product itself, but we are using it somewhere else? In this particular case, we are having a state right here, use effect. So how do we test that? So in unit testing, right? So we are going to actually unit test the related product itself. Then later we are going to see how we are going to combine the form, and then the related products components and see how they relate to each other based on what we actually type into this field right here. So for the related products, right, I've already gone ahead and written some quite basic tests. Just want to talk about this. So we are actually mocking the fetch service. So we are using the just mock. We are mocking all the functions over there because we don't want it to actually interact with APIs. We are just testing this particular component. So once we've mocked that, we want to also mock a resolve value. So in case actually the function is being called, which is actually mocked, which is being called, we actually want to return some values that we have specified, right? So that it doesn't cause any problems. So in this case, we are returning an array of two products, product one and product two. So in this case right here, as we are rendering this later product, we know that it needs a product. It needs the name of a product, right? So in this case, we are passing in searching products to this particular related product, and we expect to see that these two products that is being returned from the server actually shows up on the page. So that's why we are using find by text and find by text for product one and product two. So this will ensure that the actual request went through, then we got the data and we're actually showing that, right? So we are actually utilizing the states of the product or the value product, right? And in this last case here, we are actually going to check to see that was the mock function or the fetch service, was it actually called with the value that we actually passed in, right? This is in relation to when maybe you are doing some kind of manipulation to the product over here. So maybe if the product has nothing in there, you want to actually send some particular item. For example, let's say we have to format product, then in this case, if product want to play around with it, right? So let's say we want to replace some items in there. So let's say, for example, we want to, if the user has searched something like this, $8, right? You actually want to replace that by this. I don't know, for maybe want to sanitize your products or anything like that. Search query, you want to do something like this, and you actually want to pass this thing here, then you can, this check over here can actually ensure that what we actually pass, what was passed to the function corresponds to what we actually want. So in this case, nothing will happen. So this one works perfectly well, right? As you can see in the test, it works perfectly well. But what if in this case we're actually sending a $8, right? Somewhere, right? We actually pass in $8. We expect that this $8 should not be there. So when we save that, actually runs the test, and it knows that the search input was actually wasn't called with the $8 because we sanitized the product, the search query, right? All right, so that's by the way. So that's the first case of when we actually have a product. But what if we don't have a product, right? In that case, what do we do? Now I'm just passing an empty string, right? And we expect that the function is not being called, the API function is actually not being called. So so when you isolate a component that makes use of states, right? Or makes use of a value, which could potentially be a state. This is how most likely you might play around with it, seeing that you pass in certain values and see how it interacts with that particular value. Now let's take a look at how it will interact in a full application, such as this one, where you can search for a product, then we expect that it should show the product somewhere, right? How do we test a case like this? Actually, it's pretty simple, in that in this case right here, what we are going to do is actually going to input some values over here, right? But we are not going to manipulate the product here because it's actually a state. So when we type in the product name or whatever you are looking for, we expect that the related products for that search item should actually show up on the page somewhere else, right? And that's exactly what we are doing over here. We are still doing the mock of the API, which is fine. And we are doing the exact same case over here. So product 1, product 2, we are mocking the response, right? We are mocking the response. So what we are doing is that so the next case that we actually have here is that we actually grab the products field and we type in some value, right? So I type in my product, right? And on the document, we can do this. You can expect that on the screen we get by display value. So that display value is going to look for all the inputs or the fields that has the display attribute, right? So we want to get by display value. And what do we actually want to search, right? We expect that this product actually exists somewhere else. It exists onto the screen. So get by display value to be in the document, right? So once we enter in the search of the product, what we are looking for, it should be stored into our state over here. And then the state will it will then re-render this particular input and then show what we have actually searched, which these two things are doing. So we save that, and to actually see that the product actually is actually entered into the field. So that's what this check is going to do. And then in this section right here is similar or is the same as what we were doing for the test for the related products component. We're actually expecting to see that we have some products showing up on the page. And that's what we are doing over here. So we expect to see that product 1 shows up on the page, product 2 will show up on the page. I didn't bring product 2 because it doesn't really correlate to what we had. Just redundant, right? because we already know that it will show up on the page because of this. All right. And lastly, we do again like we did the almost the exact same assertion over here where we have this fetch the API. We test that the API was actually called with whatever the user inputted, right? Whatever the user typed in the field. Now, so this is it, right? So this is how we can actually test an interaction between two components that have some states, right? In isolation from each of them, the component that utilizes that state, you can test them by actually manually passing in values, right? And you might also come across cases where the a function is also passed to, let's say, a set product, right? A function is also passed to the component, right? Which is supposed to change the product based on whatever that the component is doing, right? Which is supposed to change the product. In that case, you also do the exact same thing where you have to pass in the function, so set product, where you have to pass in a function. In this case, it will be a just test function or a just mock function, not doing anything, right? So you can pass in a function and ensure that the function is called. And if there's some values being passed to that function, it actually pass to that function, right? But in such a case, it won't actually affect the other prop value because it's not under a React, how do you call it? A React component where you have a state and then manipulating one thing will actually affect another thing. This one, we have isolated that component from that state and we just want to see how these two values interact. So in this case, you won't actually see a change in the actual state because the function that we are passing in is not manipulating that particular state. But when you place that kind of component or related product into this main component, so in this case, you have a set product, right? So set product, and what we pass in, so probably set value. And in this case, you are passing in an object and doing other things, right? So in this case right here, the set product is in relation to that particular product. So you can play so you can manipulate this particular component and look at the interaction between the parent component and the child components for the related product. So that I can see that what happens when the state changes based on what you actually do to the main component. That's how you can actually test when you have a function that actually manipulates that state, right? It's mainly you test it based from the parent component that's passing in those values, right? So that's all I wanted to talk about. I'll link the code, the source code in the video description or a pinned comment, and you can check out, see how you can modify how this testing is done for your own use case. So I just wanted to give an idea of what you can actually do with this kind of testing of states and then states being passed around to other components. It's just a general idea I'm giving so you can build on it for your own use case. So thanks very much for joining or for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.